Our first reading this morning is from 1 Kings, 19th chapter. Elijah went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him and said, "Get up and eat. Otherwise the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. The word of the Lord.
So I have been trying really hard to use August as a time to catch up on a bunch of projects that I have not been able to get to for a while. And one of those projects is building some additional sets of arms for chairs in the sanctuary. So yes, so some of these chairs have arms because as I started this about a year ago, I found that there were a couple people who really needed those chairs with the arms to help get up and down. And as I've been building them, I found that there are more people that need them than I can build them fast enough. So I want to try to get a couple more, and my goal is to have a couple more sets done before the craziness of the fall schedule sets in. And actually, I have enjoyed being able to build stuff like this for the church. First of all, because I get to play in my shop and pretend to call it work. But also, it's really satisfying to be able to build a piece of furniture that I can see and touch and know that it's going to do a lot of good for a lot of people for many years to come. Furniture, at least if you build it right, lasts a long time. And that's why furniture is an example of what economists call a durable good. A durable good is something that's intended to be used over and over again without being used up. It can last for months or years, maybe even decades. You might even be able to pass it down to your kids and your grandkids. By contrast, the other type of goods that economists talk about are consumable goods. They are consumable, they are used up in one shot. So food is the ultimate consumable good. You consume it, and it's gone. You'll need to find more food the next time you want to eat. Now, in some respects, God would seem like the most durable good ever. Because after all, God exists forever. God is never used up, no matter how many people call on God, and God never wears out, no matter how hard people try to wear God out by whining and complaining. And yet, as Jesus has been speaking of himself as the embodiment of God in these past few gospel readings, he speaks of himself as bread, a consumable good. Bread, after all, doesn't seem to last very long. When it's gone, people immediately go looking for more, as they did in the gospel reading a couple weeks ago. And they wish that this bread would be more like a durable good, that it would last forever, or at least that Jesus would give them this bread forever, which was the question they asked in last week's gospel reading. But in the end, bread is not a durable good, it's a consumable. And maybe Jesus uses this consumable image on purpose. Maybe he uses a consumable image because too often people want God to be more like a durable piece of furniture that they can put in their house and it'll just be kind of part of the surroundings. Sometimes people want God to be like a durable piece of furniture that can just be brought out kind of whenever it's needed. And sometimes people want God to be like a durable piece of furniture, which, once you've got it, you never have to think about it much again. But Jesus says God is also a consumable, at least in the sense that God is supposed to be like this bread that Elijah was given to give him strength for the journey in today's first reading. Elijah, after all, was having a tough time. He was running for his life, and he was exhausted, and he was alone. And he didn't need a chair to sit down on as much as he needed strength to keep on going. So after he lies down under a tree to sleep, an angel shows up and gives him fresh baked bread. The angel tells him, "Get up and eat." So he does. And you'd think that special angel bread would be enough once. It would last forever. But it's still bread. It's still a consumable. So the angel shows up a second time and says, "Get up and eat, or else the journey will be too much for you." What Elijah needed was a consumable. He needed actual bread. But he also needed other consumable experiences of God in his life that would give him strength for the journey. Elijah needed not just the actual bread, but also the experience of God's presence in his life. The angel shows up even in the wilderness to let him know that God hadn't forgotten about him and was still with him. And that was a consumable experience because Elijah had had the experience of God in his life before, and he would again. But the experience of God in your life is not something you can just have once and then say, "Okay, I'm over and done with it now." You need it to happen again and again and again. And this is what happens when the angel shows up. He reminds Elijah that God is still there with him, giving him strength for the journey. And Elijah needs the bread, but he also needs the consumable experience of vision from God. Elijah is at a point in his life where he is ready to pack it in. And he figures he's done all he can do, and at the beginning he says, "Okay, it's enough. I'm done. I'm done doing what you asked me to do. I can't do any more." But God tells him that he still has a journey to go on. When the angel touches him and says, "Get up, otherwise the journey will be too much for you," he's telling Elijah that there is still more to come. That in fact, even though he feels like he's done, God is not done with him. There is still a journey in front of him. He needs to know that there is still more ahead. He knows what's come before. He knows what's happening now. But sometimes vision is like a consumable experience. You need to have it over and over again. And this is what God does for him with the angel. And Elijah needs the bread, but he also needs the consumable experience of community. Elijah could not do this journey alone. He needed God. But he also needed God to give him other people for the journey with him. So if you read beyond this story, Elijah eventually, it says he journeys on this food until he gets to Horeb, the Mount of God. And when he gets there, he has this experience with the fire and the wind and the earthquake and the still small voice. And he complains to God, "I am all alone. There is no one left. It's just me." And God tells him, "Yeah, you and 7,000 other people. There are still others out there with you. And you need to go and talk to some of them." And that's what he's sent to do. Because the experience of community would be another consumable event that he would have over and over again with others that would help Elijah and give him strength for the journey. So, God really is the most durable reality in our lives. But as with Elijah, God is most powerful and helpful in our lives when God is also a consumable reality. And I think that's why Jesus keeps speaking of himself as the bread of life over and over again. Bread gives you strength for the journey of life and the journey of faith. And to experience that kind of bread in our lives, we need God to be a consumable part of our everyday existence, not just a durable thing in the background. That is, God needs to be somebody we're in relationship with each and every day, not simply an idea that we learned about long ago. And so, like Elijah, we also need the daily consumable of God's presence in our everyday lives. God isn't supposed to be just part of the background, but someone we interact with through prayer, through worship, by actually consuming the bread and wine of Jesus' presence in our lives, so that we are constantly nourished for our journey by the living experience of God each and every day. Because after all, you don't have a friend in your life and say, "I have a friend someplace that I never talk to and I never communicate with and I never interact with." That's not what a friend is. A friend is somebody you constantly interact with, and this is the way God wants to be also for us. We also need the consumable of vision from God, which, as with Elijah, doesn't usually mean that we have to have perfect clarity about exactly what the future holds. When the angel shows up, the angel does not hand him the crystal ball and say, "Gaze into this, and I'll show you how everything turns out." The angel simply says, there's more to come. Get up and go on your journey. And sometimes vision from God simply means that we grow in confidence that God is not ever done with any of us, and that we have a reason to look forward to a new chapter of the journey to which God calls us. And for us too. Like Elijah, we need the consumable experience of community, in which none of us ever tries to go it alone. Instead, we also need the consumable experience of journeying together with one another, so that through one another, God can give us strength to continue our journeys and use us as instruments to give others and be for others the bread they need to keep going on their journeys as well. So even though God is the most durable reality in our lives, remember that God remains a consumable in your life as well. Open yourself to God's living presence in the daily reality of your life. Look for guidance that God is giving you each day, even if it's as simple as somebody reminding you to get up and get some food, or the journey will be too much for you. And be part of the community that God has called together, so that you can both receive and share and be the bread of life.